Hello, welcome to today's webinar, The World from Here. As we know, right now is a defining moment. This is an unprecedented time in our history. What's happening today is impacting every person across the globe. I'm Dan Gay, Chief Marketing Officer of BlockCerts Blockchain, and there is a phenomenal cause and effect which is also changing business, healthcare, and industries at a lightning pace. Today, Tim Vasko has invited 3 global leaders in 3 different sectors across the globe to share their recent changes and vision for what that means. It will be enlightening and insightful, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it. I'll share more about that in just a minute. Unfortunately, all of us are impacted by this pandemic. There isn't one person that I know that isn't either financially impacted or individuals being sent home to work. Those are the lucky ones, and the other ones that are trying to cope with their new reality. So with that impact is not only impacting us today, but it will impact us long into the future. But our hearts go out to those that are being impacted. But there are many different things that are happening today, and even as we watch the TV, that are changing our lives, that will change our lives forever. Businesses are grappling with how to keep productivity high with negative news. How do you keep people moving in the stay-at-home environment? How do you keep everyone unified and disseminate information and keep businesses flowing down this new path? And in every business, we're all presented with new challenges that were really not there weeks ago. So with that, today you'll hear from business leaders in these different various sectors from around the world and how we're making changes in their vision of the new business future. And we'll begin with Tim Vasko with his vision. He's the CEO and founder of BlockCerts Blockchain. And what's amazing to me is that some of this vision is information he's shared on the stage in a number of events, a year or 2 years ago. It's now coming to fruition. So the great visionary leader that we're all following here at our company. And Tim's predictions on how this pandemic will change how we work, live, and play, how new technologies will be born, and then he'll talk about the largest new frontier and how we need to seize it. We'll hear from Dr. Zeid Mohamedali from Vancouver, Canada. He's the president of eHealth Global and a leading speaker around the globe in both cannabis, CBD treatment, and leading in technology. Dr. Zeid will provide current updates from the World Health Organization and just how quickly new ways of doing business are impacting the medical community and what that means for health organizations, physicians, businesses, and consumers. And you'll certainly want to hear this because I was quite enamored by listening to Dr. Zeid over the last couple of days. And then next we'll travel to Italy where Daniele Mensi is, who is the founder of the Oxford Blockchain Group and president of an international exchange, a new exchange called FusionSTX. And Daniel will share his insights on how current macro events are changing the markets, exchanges, and the new digital frontier. So before I introduce Tim, I'd like to just say a saying that I used to tell my kids, and now it's something that they truly understand in their mid and late 20s, and that is, when seas are calm, swim. When seas turn stormy, swim harder. So right now it's time to swim harder. Keep your heads up when waves try to knock you down, and when you're in the middle of the storm, it's really hard to see the sunshine at the horizon, but that day will come. And for the visionaries and leaders, new opportunities will unfold that will change our future. And with that, I'd like to introduce Tim Vasko, our founder of BlockCerts Blockchain, who's past professor, writer, global speaker, and tech thought leader. Tim is on the Forbes Technology Council, Canadian Trade Council, and MIT blockchain cohort, and holds many other distinctions. And Tim, I'm really looking forward to your talk today. So with that, Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for the words of confidence and insight. I'd like to thank everybody for taking your time today, and first and foremost say the reason we're here is to help, to change some perspectives and really help put some sense to all of this. I would like to say I hope everybody's safe, that your families are safe, weathering the storm in a fearful time. We've often heard there's nothing to fear but fear itself. We hope to put some sense to what the world is going to look like from here with our views and our strategies, what we're doing. I'd also like to say that I feel incredibly blessed and grateful for the kind of company we've been able to form at BlockCerts over the years. We've been digital for seven or more years, completely distributed around the globe. That has prompted a lot of phone calls to us. Companies that employ as many as 3,000 people have contacted some of our teams and said, how do you do it? We have the very fortunate position of being an organization that's digital already. Our teams are working 24/7, weekends, around the clock. We're working to provide what we have to the world, to be leaders in a way that we're not only speaking but actioning on what we talk about. We're trying very hard to walk our talk and put this out there. So again, thank you for your time. It's valuable. Thank you for your strength. That's more valuable in the world than you can imagine right now. So the world from here. First thing I'm going to do is start with a statement that I've lived by since my 20s, actually. I first found this when I was in my late 20s, which is more years ago than I care to talk about. It is, we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking we used when we created them. Albert Einstein. I think he would say that now. I think that we are in a time where we need to rethink what we are thinking and be very focused on how we can change that thinking in the world. I'd like to tell you and show you actually a visual to get this started, a 2-minute video clip of what the world looks like in the world today from an aerial view. From where this all emanated from. And the one thing I want to start with more than anything else is inclusion and rationale. We are seeing, I think, damaging actions in media, where we have a media war now, Beijing and China kicking U.S. journalists out, U.S. Censoring Chinese journalists. That's not what we need right now, and we certainly don't need bigotry in the world. We need acceptance and inclusion more than ever. If anything that COVID-19 tells us is we are all connected, and it doesn't matter what color our skin is or what ethnicity we come from. We all have a commonality, which is we're human. I live in, and those of you who know me personally, I am in a mixed race family. My wife is Chinese. My children are mixed race. All of my children are mixed race, all 5 of them. And I would encourage all of us to practice tolerance, because this is happening everywhere in the globe. And so let's look and see what it looks like from above. So that kind of says it. So what I want to do now is say, have a look at where we were before all this happened. And this is what we thought. This is what the world was thinking. This is what I was thinking about where we would be. And we had our IT predictions. We were dealing with the coming year will mark an inflection and point in how humans interact with the technology they've created. We weren't thinking about what humans would do with technology to deal with a crisis like this. We were thinking about how that would work in the business world, how that would work in the healthcare world. We were thinking about AI. We were thinking about all that. So the idea of how humans are going to interact with technology has fast forwarded. We've just seen that humans are now more digitally connected than any other time in history. You saw from the aerial view where people no longer exist, yet here we are gathered in this amazing world right now from all over the world on a technology platform. So what we know is we know that the world is going to change, and it will change forever. It will constantly be in flux. Years ago, when I was first starting in my financial career, I read a book called The Merchant Bankers. The quote, "We must not let daylight in upon the magic," was a quote by Walter Vasko, who was a philosopher and a financial visionary of his day. And the idea was that that the great financial families, the Hambros, the Barings, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, would keep the information to themselves and benefit and have this kind of contained information. When World War I broke out, the dominance of Wall Street came out and the high stakes investors, and that market became the market that we have today, the market we see crashing around us. In 2008, having been around technology long enough and business long enough now, this is my fourth go at a dramatic event, but I don't think we've seen anything like this where everybody on the planet is affected. But in 2008, Michael Panzer wrote a book called When Giants Fall. Businesses will struggle amidst wars, shortages, logistical disruptions, and a breakdown of the established monetary order. You couldn't say more about what's happening today. It was already happening. COVID-19 makes it happen faster. For many people, it will be nothing short of the modern dark ages, where each day brings fresh anxieties, unfamiliar risks, and a sense of foreboding. That's very prophetic, and I think it's very real. However, for those enlightened few who understand what's really going on, this will represent the opportunity of a lifetime when they can realize goals, achieve a level of wealth, security, and inner peace that will leave them head and shoulders above everybody else. Which crowd do we want to be in as people? We can be afraid, we can be fearful, or we can seek to understand, and we can seek to take steps that are important today, and we can incorporate those tools and those elements we have with our platforms to really become true global leaders and make the shift that was going to happen anyway. It's just happening faster. It's just happening now across every economic and social element that we have. So with that, I'd like to welcome to our panel here Dr. Zeid Mohamedali, who is a good friend. We've been working together for a few years now on where we thought the healthcare market was going to be with cannabis and alternative therapies and things like that in CBD. We still think it's going to be there. We think it's bigger now. And I'd also like to welcome Daniele Mensi, who I was fortunate enough to meet in 2018 when working at Oxford, our blockchain cohort. Daniel and I have had many discussions. We also believe that businesses and the monetary order was in a massive shift. Again, it's going to happen faster. And so when we talk about the enlightened few, we talk about who is going to really, who's been thinking about this. This isn't something we woke up with yesterday or on March 5th and said, wow, let's think about this. This is something that's ingrained in the three of us and in the people that we're working with, our teams and our philosophies. So Zeid, maybe you can share a little bit about what, briefly what you think this means to the world, and then we'll ask Daniel to jump in as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. When you mentioned right now, when you said the enlightened few, when you mentioned the enlightened few, the one thing that I think struck me, Tim, and we've had these discussions before, is how a global changing event such as COVID-19 can have on minds that are not already thinking down this road. So it's easy for people like yourself, me, and others to be already sort of thinking about the next generation and how the digital technologies of the world are going to integrate into our daily life. But there are many people set in the old paper. Some people are even back in the old chisel and rock days still in their thinking. And the healthcare system actually is a classical example. Unfortunately, those that are in leadership roles often come from a background of the paper days. And what's interesting is what I've noticed in the last sort of, I would even say in the last 48 hours or 72 hours, are some huge shifts in how we're delivering healthcare. So regulatory bodies that were very stringent, made up of the old paper type people who would say, by the way, you can only do a telehealth platform, a telehealth consultation with a patient if you're in a healthcare approved facility in a room with a specific computer, with specific software, etc. They've turned around and they've released basically those reins and said to physicians, these are special circumstances, and the only way we're going to get on top of this and save lives is if you have the tools. And if you have the tools to make a phone call, to do telehealth from home, to hop onto your computer and help people, we are allowing you to do this. There are no more restrictions. We will not penalize you. We will not restrict you. And so what I'm seeing is a massive shift in how healthcare is perceiving how we deliver that care that I've never seen before. All the restrictions, all the boundaries are coming off. And these enlightened few are getting to be enlightened many. And I think this is a very exciting time for how we view, how we deliver services. And I'll talk a little bit more to that in a few slides, but I just wanted to touch upon that quote that you made right now and what an impact it has had on the healthcare system.
Thank you, Zeid. And Daniel, maybe you could jump in from Italy. You're in the thick of one of the epicenters of what's going on, and maybe you can explain a little bit about your views and what you're seeing from your world and perspective.
Yeah, so first of all, I will give an example just to somehow depict the situation I'm living right now, because it gives a perspective of the normal people. So, and to give you this perspective, I will use an example that comes from my family, from my parents. Think about, I was talking to them actually about September 11 back in 2001, and I remember the words of my father at the time. They were, well, I don't care because I'm not taking the plane, so I will not be impacted by that. And he was telling me, you're traveling a lot, so you have to be scared to travel again on a plane. I will never be in your position. He told me, my father. But now, so 19 years later, my father called me yesterday and say, I'm scared because this is touching me. That's the dimension of the scale of what we're living at the moment. I'm not scared actually about this because somehow I'm not scared by something which I don't know. Because I've been trying the last years almost to focus at being ready when a black swan happened in life, how to cope with it. And now I'm dealing with it, accepting the fact that we live in a world that where predictions do no longer exist. Because what we can reasonably do is eventually calculate risk and measure them. But I'm very fearful of the predictions which I see at the moment about what is going to happen next. I think we don't know. Because it's complex, because there's no model, because statistics is no longer true. So, and coming back to the reality, I'm very inspired by what happens right now in the country, in Italy, because there is a fundamental dimension that for me is a tool that we all need, that is transparency. Italy is not the biggest country in the world. Italy is not the richest country in the world. Italy is not the most effective country in the world, by far it's not. But what we're seeing right now is it's something which I think it will be of a fundamental help of what is going to happen next, which I don't know. So meaning deploying transparency as a tool. There's no trust without transparency. That is the fundamental, in my view, leakage of the whole financial system that has been exposed to disruption as it happens right now. Because trust is a consequence of untransparency. There cannot be trust without transparency. And for me, the tool to deliver trust and confidence is transparency. Of course, all this is meaningless if it's not backed by an action plan, by a tool, by a platform, by people. So I believe today we're here to inspire the people attending this webinar to take action, because we are taking action, and we want to be open and transparent with all of you, what we're doing and how we believe can help to improve our action plan. That was my introduction.
Thank you, Daniel. So with that, I'm going to pick a few of those words out that are really important that Daniel had, which is statistics are no longer true. And he used three words, which is trust, truth, and transparency. And trust, truth, and transparency, if you look down here, is the tagline we've had at BlockCerts for some time. But let's talk about statistics, and let's talk about something that I've been focused on for a long time, which is data. And let's talk about how we've been thinking about data, how data is used, what's behind that black box of data. Why was it important? Why did we care? Well, you know what? We basically cared because we're consumers at heart. We're a consumer economy. And when we looked at that data, it was worth billions and billions of dollars. So we were thinking of it as a perfectly functioning machine of economics, of information that people who knew how to manage that data and those statistics and make predictions would work, so that we would buy things, so that we could influence. And we saw these kinds of data analytics models being used and debated and deliberated with the emergence of the Facebook thing, and then all of the elements with Cambridge Analytica, politics, but even more so with some of the cybersecurity things like Equifax and Marriott, and the big data breaches and uses of that data economy in Europe and the GDPR with Google. We saw that data was extremely valuable. We saw who owned the data, benefiting from it. And we saw business models of this data that were actually making a nominal future value of the data and turning it into an asset. Data being this massive global digital asset that is centralized and that was being clamored for like a rare mineral, maybe and certainly more valuable than gold. And that data modeling continued to predict that it would be of greater value to this type of thinking. The thinking we were in business, by 2025, it would have doubled on a global average. You can see the U.S. almost 3 times, actually over 3 times the value of data because of what? Because of the ability to use that data to attract consumerism and marketing and things like that. That's how valuable data was, and that's what it was being thought about. And then this happened. And now we have to think about data in a different way. We have to think about digital in a different way. We have to think about what it actually means when we see this happening in our world and it's killing people and we see deaths. It's no longer simply about our ability to market or utilize data to manipulate opinions and ideas. It's about data that is encircling us that will never go away now. It will never change who we are or what we are. We are inextricably linked to our data footprint. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, but now it's real. And it's incredibly real. And what I like to do is open this up to Dr. Zeid about how real that is when we start thinking about healthcare, when we think about the kinds of data we're going to capture, and data that is already through technology being used. AI-powered temperature screening was already being trialed in Taiwan, or I mean in Singapore and Asia. China's developed non-contact ID recognition, already there. This didn't just come out. This was all about data and who's going to control that data. What is that going to be like? And how in the future are you? Think about yourself. When you walk out the door and somebody coughs, has a dry throat like Zeid had earlier or like I have, what are you going to think? What are you going to want to, when you go to a gathering event, when you go to the next sports game, when they start playing again, you go to a show, what are you going to think? What is that level of personal space and personal rights and social responsibility for you and social expectation going to be like for you and for the world when you go out next? When this market and world starts operating again, what are we going to see and what's it going to be like? And what is your health going to mean to you? So maybe to speak about that a little bit, I've got some slides about how we were operating and thinking about this before. Zeid, maybe you can discuss what you think this is going to be.
Absolutely. So I think you've touched on some very interesting concepts here when we talk about data and we talk about trust and things. So one of the things that I face on a daily basis is who owns the data, how do we control the data, how do we trust the data, and I'm talking about healthcare data right now. And this has come into light especially recently. For example, just to give you an example related to COVID-19, you know, we have a number of cases that appear, and currently the reporting of these cases is by regions. So BC has X number of cases, Canada has X number of cases. Vancouver Island, where I practice, has X number of cases. But but the pushback from the public is, well, tell us where the cases are. What town is it in? What street is it in? Right? And of course, the health authorities push back and say, well, we can't. There's privacy issues. We can't release that kind of information. But we can tell you globally that this is, you know, that there are this many cases in the area, and therefore everyone in that area needs to have a heightened precaution and be aware of contact points. The importance of that is the control of that information. So as people are exposed to the healthcare system, they become a data entry point. And the question becomes, who controls that data entry point? How do we verify that that data entry point is correct, whether it's truth or not? And how do we then release that data once it's into the system? And so these aren't new concepts. These are concepts that have existed for many generations in the healthcare system. And for example, when I do research, we do a fair amount of research, we have to store our data. Everyone is digitized. Excuse me. A number is applied to that individual in the study, and we track that number. But that piece of information is stored on the cloud, etc. And there's always concern about the breach of that data, the unfolding of that information, the tracing back to the individual. And if it's, let's say, a study I'm doing on sexually transmitted infections, for example, what will that mean to the person who's enrolled in that study? And how do we protect that? And of course, recently in BC, we had a breach of one of our laboratories. Hundreds of thousands of data points were held at hostage for money based, from hackers that had got into the system. And that really brought up into light how we store and how we trust our data. So having said that, the solution already exists, as Tim says. This is not something that we have invented now. This is not something that's coming to light because of the recent viral infection. This is something that's existed for a number of years, but it's a matter of now having it adopted into mainstream to have it function as part of mainstream society. And we were sort of fortuitous or lucky in the sense that at Health Certain, we were developing a platform for cannabis, which is a big portion of my practice, that now becomes even more important in general health evolution here. So I'm just going to focus back and use the example of what we have built on the cannabis side so that you can understand how you can extrapolate from that and see how it could apply to many other disease areas and about just general healthcare delivery. So one of the things with cannabis is actually having a complete trust of where your cannabis-based medicine has come from. Did it fall off the back of a truck from some dark alley, or did it arrive from a qualified licensed producer who has gone through all the checks and balances to ensure that you have the best medicine possible, GMP, certified medication? So how do you find out when you're in a store, when you're in a patient and you're in a store, how do you find out whether that medicine actually has been verified to be real and truthful? So one of the ways we do that, of course, is by simply tagging that piece of cannabis-based medicine right back to its producer. And so we have methods in place in which we can trace a plant right from its point of seed right through the point of right through to the point of sale. And by tracing this, you can see everything and as much as information as you want about how that plant was treated, how it was cured, how it was processed, how it was planted, etc. So every step of the way can be verified. And as a consumer, I have some faith that that cannabis-based medicine that I'm taking will be coming from a verified truth source. That's sort of step one. It allows me to know where my medicine came from. Within the Zeid Certain platform, or within the platform that we've created, we needed a way of communicating, or we needed a way of allowing patients to access cannabis care or cannabis-based medicines. And the problem we have right now is that there are many clinics out there that provide some cannabis-based medicine, but they're not at the highest quality necessarily, and they're not by trained physicians necessarily. And worse off, there are many family doctors that say, look, if you want, patient, if you want to go out and get your medicine, sure, you can get your cannabis-based medicine. I'm not the one that's going to write the prescription. One, I don't believe in it, or two, I don't understand it, that I should give you good information on what to get and how to get it. So there's a niche area there which is lacking, and that is having a trusted source of cannabis consultation. So built into our platform, we built in a telehealth platform that allows you to intake general information, a basic SOAP template that allows you to see what medical conditions the patient has, etc. And that can be done in an automated fashion. So it reduces the amount of time the physician has to contact with the patient to be more efficient. There is then video conferencing, which allows the physician to interact with the patient. And after that, there's a recommendation stream that takes place for that patient, in which the patient can then, with the physician or let's say pharmacist or healthcare provider, go ahead and shop and buy the appropriate cannabis-based medicine, pay for it right on the app, and have it shipped directly from that verified source we talked about to their door. More importantly, afterwards, the patient can then log into their own file, and they can then add in how they're doing on their cannabis-based medicine and allow them to modify the dose, have advice back and forth through secure messaging with the pharmacist, with the clinician, with the healthcare provider, and modify their dose to fit what their needs are. Most important though, within that, we gather the data so we understand how that cannabis-based medicine works for that disease process at a global level. So we can start to refine our recommendations to our patients as they start to consume the cannabis-based medicine. So that entire process being digitized, being secure, being trusted, and being stored in a trusted fashion on a blockchain is an absolute critical step to where we're going into the future. I'm just going to pause for a second and say, if you think about this, I just talked about cannabis-based medicine. There's nothing that restricts this platform from being utilized for anything in the healthcare, general healthcare, diabetes, hypertension, et cetera, et cetera. So the beauty of it is you have a platform that is secure and trusted. You can modify it to meet your disease needs, and you can do it in a secure manner so that the patient feels comfortable in that interaction, and all their healthcare providers feel comfortable in that interaction. And equally important, the data is controlled by the patient. It is through their operating systems and in their world that the data is stored, so they know who has access to that data. So it's not that it's going to be stored somewhere and they won't have control over that information. The final point I'd want to make, the final point I was just going to make is just that the access to this information can take place obviously through multiple means, right? So obviously there are smart devices, there are kiosks, et cetera, which really makes it more ubiquitous and global in terms of its application. Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
And I think that what's important is to highlight what Dr. Mohamedali is saying is we now have this mandate of digital healthcare. We're showing a slide here that shows where we were headed and are headed and the platforms we're dealing with for digital healthcare, and now to protect not only those healthcare workers from infectious diseases, even to how do I get the information instantly that I need that is critical if I'm a professional and I don't have it. How can I connect in somebody who does, somebody who understands that? And specifically, that is really a critical kind of forward-thinking model that we've built into the system. And certainly we were thinking about cannabis. And now all of a sudden we've had this happen. So thank you, Zeid. But what I want to do is discuss what a black swan is. Now, some of you may understand the concept of a black swan. Those of you that have heard of this may not be new to you. Those of you who haven't, let's just discuss a little bit about the black swan theory because we're living it. The black swan theory is where the, I've got a little issue here, sorry. The black swan theory is that the Dutch in 1726 captured 2 black swans and proved that black swans actually existed. Black swans are rare events and they have an extreme impact. And as Daniel said, they can only be predicted retrospectively, not prospectively. So the black swan is a highly improbable event that would have severe consequences if they impacted. That is where we're at with COVID-19. It's a black swan. It's an extremely rare event. In fact, the only event probably in human history that has hit this much, this hard, with this amount of impact across the globe, a connected planet. So how did that connection happen? And in fact, how are we both dealing with it and how are we controlling it? And what is happening now is this data and the things that we're referring to, this digitization of our world, our technology and our connections, is data becomes who we are in the real world. We are all statistics. We are all a statistic. I heard in South Korea that, and I don't know how true this is because it's difficult to disseminate information, but they've tracked down in South Korea the patient zero and found that that one patient zero affected 80% of all of the COVID cases in the country. It was one woman who went to church. She was sick. She went to church. And then she went to a gathering after church, and 80% of the country was affected. We are all a statistic, and that will never change again. We are all individuals, and we are all connected. And that is why data becomes who we are in the real world. How we are measured, where we belong, will look something like this. There will be the outliers. There will be the people who are somewhat separated. We as an organization at BlockCerts are somewhat separated from all of those other people that had physical office spaces. We've been working digitally. This didn't affect us. In fact, it brought us closer together in the world we were used to. This is not uncommon for us. My son is a professor at Columbia, along with his partner, and he is teaching digitally. They said, we're using these tools. They said, oh, well, here's how I do it when I do webinars. And just explain it. He goes, oh, there's some really good ideas. I'm like, well, I've been doing it for 10 years. So digital to us, we're in this pie of not being overly affected and maybe even all the way down that long tail of understanding how this works. The world is going to look more and more toward that kind of direction and leadership and understanding of what it means to truly be connected, and that's all going to be through data. Our data today in the before circle is what we were looking at. Before, we were worried about who we are, what is our credit, what do we buy, who are our friends. Who are our friends is a really big thing that happened with the Cambridge Analytica Facebook thing that's called homophily in digital marketing analytics. So we say, oh, how do I influence Zeid? And then how do I influence all the people he hangs out with? And actually, Facebook had created in 2013, 2014, a referential patent to figure out who you were from who you hung out with and what they were doing. So this homophily thing was already there and being used for marketing. And you can see in the circles, those were the things that we were interested in before COVID-19. After, it's where are we going? What's our age? What's our health? What do we do? What did we do yesterday? Where were we? Where are we going to go next? And importantly, where have we been? That's what we're hearing about in the news. And now all of that is our digital identity. And all of that scattering that's happened online is going to come into a place where that becomes your passport, not only within countries, but within your own hometown on a scale like we've never, ever seen before. Digital identity has been around for, again, as Zeid said with the healthcare, has been around for a long time. This is on digital advertising, new empirical data. Globally, 763 million devices were blocking ads by the end of 2019. In other words, we don't want all those ads. 527 million people were blocking ads on mobile, seeking a way to control their marketing profile. 236 million people were blocking ads on desktops. Mobile ad blocking adoption has grown by 64% since December 2016. This was a cry for privacy. 69% of global ad blocking is on mobile, and 49% of top U.S. Comscore's publishers studied and are leveraging this statistic. Okay, this is what data was. Data service providers, personal information, and where do we govern that? How much data is there? There is 463 billion gigabytes per day of data, growing from 44 billion in 2016 by 2025. The general internet population of the world today is 3.8 billion, or more than half of the world's population. And during these times, we were talking about the authenticated handshake. How do we know that these are the people, that these are the ads, and that we have permission? This is what we were thinking about, but we were thinking about data completely differently. We knew it was big. We absolutely knew it was huge. The global data sphere by 2025, this was from a talk I did 2 years ago. The global data sphere will grow to 163 zettabytes. That is 1 trillion gigabytes of data. That's 10 times the data generated in 2016. And all this will unlock a unique user experience in a new world of business. No, in a new world. This will unlock a new world for all of us. Because when we're walking down the street, we're going to wonder if that cough's going to get us. We're going to wonder if we go into a crowded restaurant, if it's clean, if it's safe, if the food we get has been infected, if the kitchen has been sanitized. We're going to wonder about things we took for granted. And that's going to be streamlined because we're a race of beings on this planet of convenience and efficiency. And if we can add to that calm, if we can add to that with the way that we do our work, then we can all get back to how we live. Or as William S. Burroughs said, panic is a sudden realization that everything around you is alive. Everything is alive. And we now know it. And we think it. And that, the good news of all of this isn't doom and gloom. The good news is you do have people that have been trying to get out of this centralized authority where we will not let daylight in upon the magic and let the daylight in upon the magic, and use that magic in a way that it's beneficial for society, not harmful, and that we get the conveniences of life that we expect. We're going to expect those conveniences and some of this thinking in a whole new way from here. We will never think about this the same. We won't ignore statistics. This is from NASA. How can we ignore global climate change when we have these kinds of statistics? Where are the populations in the world? Where did you travel? Where have you been? What's going on there? Those will all be data point statistics that are no longer going to be able to be swept under the rug with hyperbole and influential marketing that serves a purpose that may not be in society's best interest. And with all of that, it starts getting pretty scary of this dystopian society where all of that data is viewed and how that data is viewed. Certainly if you're in China, if you're in a country where it's already connected, in China, the statistic, and I'm going to get this wrong, is there are somewhere around 1.5 billion cameras. I was in China. I wrote about that. An article was published in Forbes just a couple of weeks ago, and I wrote about the digital trade war is here and it's hidden. And when we walked through the airport, I was already going through a heat sensor. They knew everything. I couldn't buy anything with a credit card. I had to use a mobile app. And certainly there was a very limited access to paper money already. So that article was kind of telling my story about what I saw of the advances of data and digital technology, but this dystopian society is something that will take us to an era of unprecedented monitoring. It is here. And now we have a mandate, a new mandate that we've been thinking about all along. Zeid talked about it, and Daniele will talk about it, is how do we protect our freedoms, our privacy, and our livelihoods for all the things that that are important to us. Certainly, you know what? Frankly, I love when I'm looking for something that Google pops up all these ads for some stuff. But for some stuff, I don't want you to have that much access, Alexa, or Google, or Apple, or whoever. I want to have my freedom. I want to have my privacy. I want to protect my livelihood. How are we protecting people's livelihoods in a business model where we control all of the data through regulatory in healthcare and keep data siloed so we can have high license fees for the hospital and it doesn't connect to somebody else's clinic easily? How can we have freedom or protection of our livelihood when we have a piece of software that gathers all our data and makes our business very efficient, but when we have a downturn, we've got a 3-year contract? I was just on the phone with a software provider, and they said, we want to do a 3-year contract. I said, wouldn't everybody? But what's 3 days going to look like from right now instead of 3 years? And if I don't pay that, what are you going to do? Cut me off? If you've ever been shut out because your credit card didn't go through, or you can't use this software and the data you put in to get your livelihood, how is that a sustainable model for the world? It's not. Centralized data is very powerful, and it's been a mandate of Silicon Valley for many years to create sticky customers. That's the thing. Sticky customers and MRR, monthly recurring revenue. They drive the dollar amount down so low that you don't even notice it going through on your credit card, and it aggregates to be quite a sum for businesses. These are the things that we've been thinking about, and we're there today. And what is personal data? It's our name, it's our address, it's where we live, it's our localization, it's all of those online identifiers we have. It's our health information, it's our income, it's our cultural profile. And in Europe, there's a thing called GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. And we have to be transparent with data. We have to limit what data you need. We have to limit kept data. We have data that must be accurate. Limit storage of personal data, integrity and confidentiality, accountability. This is the most advanced regulation in the world California has recently implemented a similar one. And now we're looking at decentralized data, and that's where $5 billion fines are coming from against Google and Facebook. I mean, we're seeing a massive cry for this personal data. It's going to get bigger. We need better ways of creating transparency and creating the flow of economics and capital. So again, a few years ago, talking on a stage, I shared this about blockchain. What are the 3 insights we have? Well, we can have, and you've heard both Daniel and Zeid talk about trust, which is the protocol of how we handle data and the process of how we handle it. Truth, it's distributed. No single entity controls that and that data, and it's the data that's distributed that we can really de-identify and get the truth down to the truth. And finally, transparency. Is it authentic? And then do we allow access? So let me give you a description of what I think that looks like in the world from here. You bought a ticket to go to an event, a sporting event, a concert. Your ticket is on your phone. Your healthcare record is on your phone. 3 days before that event, you're wearing a device that measures your temperature. Your temperature is up a bit. You get a test. You're fine. You have a cold. Colds aren't going away. Coughs aren't going away. The flu isn't going away. But when you go to that event, you're going to be scanned. That phone's going to get scanned, and you're going to be admitted, accessed, or declined, just like your credit card. We do this today. It's just more multiple data points that are going to merge incredibly fast, and how we keep the integrity of privacy and trust and truth and transparency where it's needed is going to be the mandate. That's where blockchain comes in. That's what we've been talking about. That's what we've been pushing and building. And I believe this with all of my passion, heart, and the last 1.7 million man hours we have put in to this platform. Everything I've been thinking about for years. Again, a lot of these slides are 2 years old. This one too. Issues must be developed in the protocol of how we do this. We've done this. We've been thinking this. Privacy, security, ethics, integrity, and outcomes. It's not disingenuous to try and make a profit. That's not what we're saying. We're saying, what's the integrity of how we make that profit, and do we have permission, and are you aware? The world isn't stupid. We do know profits are made. We do know businesses need to survive, need to make profits to provide employment. We can do better. We can do better with the systems we have. And that's what we're talking about. And so in line with that, how we do better with that authenticated handshake, with these encrypted elements like this block here that you can't read but has all of that data in it. And if there's a flag that needs to be there, it's there. And it's not going to breach your personal privacy, because guess what? You've got the private key. You can unlock it. Just like when you're at that kiosk, you're at that till, and your credit card's declined. Not everybody knows why it's declined, and most of the time, you don't either. You just go, oh, crap. I had it happen yesterday. We had a fraud thing that came across. One of my guys was trying to buy something on one of my cards. He's like, it won't go through. I'm like, here, let me check. Yep, there's a fraud thing. Click, you're good. Try it now. Went through. Okay? That's the world we live in. More data points. And we're going to deal with that through a process that we've dealt with forever. In fact, one of our primary entry points, as Zeid said, the data entry point is the patient. We've been dealing with this in both healthcare and fintech for a long time. In fact, it's mandated. So Daniel, maybe you can talk a little bit about what our thoughts are and the way financial markets are going to be affected out in this new world.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim. First of all, there is a very close relationship between healthcare and finance and fintech in general, mostly because both of these industries navigate under the same regulatory, let's say, uncertainty. This is valid both for finance and healthcare. If you think about crypto, but also digital assets in general, there will be, and there is already, a major shift in regulation on how not best practice, but how can compliance be ensured all along with the existing frameworks. And we're trying to proactively take a step, and this is what I'm going to explain to you, on how can we help business to ensure compliance and regulator to ensure the provision of these frameworks within environments that are being kept under control by the owners of the business, of the data. So in very short terms, as we do see here in the screen, actually the idea is to create a wallet, and the wallet itself contains a set of information that put the owner of the private keys in control. This could be personal data, that could be valid for token, that could be valid for any type of asset that is being custodied under this wallet. But the key point to enable this, the entry point is to somehow create the wallet as the entity that enable authentication. So in the traditional exchange, if you think about a crypto exchange, if you're familiar with, the process starts typically with the so-called KYC, know your customer. So where people are being asked to provide data like first name, last name, address, and the piece of document, selfies, and so on and so forth. But where those data are being stored, we actually don't know. And even more, if all these data are being shared with a third party, are those data safely managed? So, and as well as, for example, a Bitcoin in a wallet. And in the current exchange landscape, there's no exchange that treats personal data as well as a precious asset like Bitcoin, like any type of asset. And why there is a difference between the two? Because those are as important as they are. So if you can move to the next slide, Tim. Yeah, so here to give a perspective, in fact, the KYC and the AML, so the anti-money laundering, or the KYB for business, or know your person, it's a centric process in a business relationship. And at the end, any type of data which is stored within a wallet is relevant and is sensitive and has to be put under the control of the owner, so the user, okay? So as Tim was saying before, data, it's a precious element. And no one, even the best player in the world, can say, you have to trust me, because there will be always a shift in the interest of collecting data for other purposes than just to safely store them, because somehow the interests are not entirely aligned. So, and what we have done is to rethink all the business process that contains the wallet as the key element. The wallet is the key element in the onboarding process. So if you think about in a crypto exchange, when the wallet is created at the time that the asset has to be stored in a wallet. But even before I start trading, I start buying Bitcoin, I already shared an asset with the exchange, which is my data. But the wallet is not yet there. The wallet is foreseen to store only this type of assets, but not identity-like data, which is key. And number two is if you think about to validate all along all the data from all the touch points, think about a token issuer, think about a KYC or the smart contract utility, but as well as trading services and cap table and investors back office for the management of investor relations for those that issue in token as a mean of capital raise. So all these must have an authenticated place where all the data are being aggregated and safely stored. That is the wallet. Okay, so this is to say that to rethink the way exchanges operate, we need to start from the foundation on how the customers and how the user being on board. So the vision we have, and this is what we implement, is to create the wallet even before customer data are being requested, so as to initiate a trusted and authenticated users creation within the exchange ecosystem.
And one of the things that I'd like to bring, we called this fusion as we started working with Daniel and this philosophy, because the fusion between transparency of the data in investment management is very similar to what we're talking about in healthcare. The fusion of this idea that, no, behind the scenes, you can't cook the books, Enron. We're investors in this. We're people who work here. There's a real business operation here. Finova, you can't cook the books and go become a $15 billion company and then fail and take everybody down with you. These are the kinds of things that have been going on in those centralized systems and controls. And again, if we have this data connected, what you're seeing here are two global enterprise partners we already have that aggregate data all over the world so that we can see if there's money laundering, so that we can see if there's trafficking of weapons and things like that. So we can see if you're compliant, if you're a bad actor. We can see those things, and we can create tools on top of these massive databases to filter through this. And what we were thinking was, well, that's going to be the merge or the fusion of traditional markets, the fusion of investor relations, those kinds of fusion elements were going to come into play. What we are prepared for now is this idea that all of this, like Daniel was saying, identity and other elements will come in here. New liquidity markets will be born from this. Why should we have to wait if we invest in a private equity company with our money because we think it's a great opportunity, wait for that to go IPO, which is so rare. Less than 1% of companies ever get there. Less than 1%. It's not ever been a sustainable model. And if you've been on the fintech side of this,
yeah, thank you, Tim. I think on the word of fusion.
Go ahead.
I was saying even more on the word of fusion, we are essentially fusing the some characteristics of the stock exchange and commodity exchange. Think about New York Stock Exchange and Toronto Stock Exchange in terms of the assets being traded there, with the potential, the scalability, and the liquidity of a digital asset exchange. All of this fused together, and that is fusion.
And so in the work that we've been doing together for quite some time now, Daniel and I recognize this. And the interesting part about these two people you just heard from is that the face of this data is different. One is the face of our health. One is the face of our financial health. But as a technologist and a platform inventor, creator, and builder, it's the same. Data is data. Operations is operations. And how the machines work is similar across the board. So from that, and thank you, Daniel, I do have a guest speaker here who I'd like to just take a few minutes and gather. If Jason is out there, Jason, are you on?
Yes, I'm here.
So Jason is our global legal counsel. When I say global, Jason's an incredible individual. He is licensed in Europe, in the United States, in Canada. He's got a global perspective on regulatory, on where we go from here. So maybe, Jason, can you just give us your perspective a little bit about jurisdictionally and globally. What do you think that this effect is going to be on what regulators are thinking, what laws are going to be affected and so forth? Because obviously that's a world that we need to adopt and incorporate and consider.
Right, absolutely. I think, from a legal perspective, COVID-19 has had an impact on every facet and every practice of law across the globe. I think we've realized that we have these legacy systems in place that aren't proficient with dealing with something like this, and there's a huge lack of efficiency in the market. And this stems from regulations, and it's gotten into these companies that now have huge economies of scale, which is making it very difficult for them to transition. We're seeing a lot of changes in the regulatory environment, and in my opinion, and again, this isn't legal advice, but in my opinion, these changes will be here to stay, and I think there's going to be considerably more changes. I think people are starting to see that the systems that were in place before can't handle an event like this, and to be honest, even when something like this isn't going on, they weren't efficient to begin with. There's been huge changes in the SEC. They've coined this term regulatory flexibility. And one of the things that they're allowing public companies to do is have virtual board meetings, virtual shareholder meetings for their annual their AGMs. And to be honest, it's kind of mind-boggling that this wasn't implemented before. Why is this only happening now in face of a crisis? But I think the changes are going to be here to stay, and I think the access to capital for a lot of companies that are looking for it is going to increase. I think the manner in which companies can raise capital and actually enter the capital markets will become easier. However, I do think compliance is going to be tighter. I think the regulatory burden on different companies in terms of transparency, in terms of just information disclosure, is going to increase, and we're seeing that already. Companies like HSBC, companies like Levi's, in their latest annual report, they've mentioned the risk factors that COVID-19 brings, and obviously that's had a huge impact on their stock prices. A company like Alpha Protec, which makes masks that meet government protection levels, is predicted an uptake in business related to coronavirus. And I believe it was last week, and when they filed their 8K, they said that they are exponentially ramping up production of its respirator mask. And so I think it depends exactly where you are in the capital markets industry and what role that you have. But I think the biggest thing that we're going to see is increase in efficiency. They're not going to lessen the compliance requirements, but what they're going to do is they're going to become more flexible in the manner in which you comply. And these legacy companies, these legacy systems are going to have to adapt. They're going to have to adapt to meet this this regulatory burden, and the only way that a lot of these companies will be able to survive is if they find a more efficient and effective way to maintain their compliance. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And unfortunately, this crisis has had an impact on not just public companies, but small businesses, private companies. And there are some things that people can do and should be doing to make sure that they have some efficient processes in place. And that's from internal controls, that's from labor and employment, that's from their own contracts. People should be looking at their force majeure clauses and see if there's anything there. People should be looking at if there's any frustration. People should be looking at if their funding arrangements, if they violated any covenants. There's a lot of things, a lot of practical steps that small businesses can even take to ensure that they're coming out of this for better than worse.
And thank you, Jason. And so, again, the theme continues, which is this idea of compliance, transparency, and the way the world goes from here. We talked about the digital wallet that we had already started working on, and this was done before all of this happened. We haven't launched this yet, but IDs, private keys, signatures, contacts, contracts, tracking, how we work, the file vault, finances, digital commerce, security, and payments. All of these things, that's what our wallets used to look like. Your wallet's been your lifeline offline. Your digital wallet is your control online. As an organization, we've been thinking about this. We've been thinking about, what do connected devices look like? What will they look like in the future? Again, slide from 2 years ago when we were talking about, what does healthcare look like online? What's being monitored? Did you ever think about that Fitbit or your watch all going up into the cloud? And who has that? Well, this all of a sudden went from, man, you didn't run or work out enough this week or stand up because your Apple Watch told you to, or your Fitbit, but you now have your temperature monitored. You now have the event that you're going to go to that you're wearing on your wrist or on your body with you, and somebody has that information. We need to think about a new paradigm. And although this technology exists, and I think it's really important to lean on something that Jason just said, it's adaptation. These technologies have existed for a long time. We've been evolving on the internet with software as a service, as it's called, for around databases for 30, 40 years now. And all of a sudden, we wake up and we have these data pools in silos. It's not that there's not cool tech out there, really efficient, pretty apps out there. There are. And as a technology CEO, inventor, I have to tell you, it's really hard to make something so complex simple. And people love simple, like these pictures here, and beautiful. They love it. Steve Jobs gave us that with Apple, beauty and elegance and simplicity in our devices. But behind that magic, let's let some daylight in. Behind that magic, let's look at what that platform is and what is happening behind the scenes. Just like we need to with our health, with our finances, and with where the world's at. We have to be thinking about what's behind all of this. I've been working on, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Tim, I was just gonna add one point there that you take that one step further. Now with geolocating, machine learning, your behavior patterns, your healthcare behavior patterns are automatically collected by our smart devices and the IoTs that we wear. And that data, again, as a consumer, if you don't control that data, it does have implications, let's say, for insurance companies and how you might be charged on your insurance company or who has access to that information. So I think just looking even beyond what's already happening, but the next generation is going to be even more difficult to manage and control unless we understand how that all comes together.
Exactly. And so bringing that together, and thank you, Zeid, for pointing that out, because this is some work I've been working on. I'll obviously ask my colleagues here to collaborate on this, but the idea of digital identity assets and what we call smart contracts are actually the programmatic management of our life transactions are changing the world, your business work, and your life. This isn't new. This is something that we've known for some time. but it's at hyperspeed now. And the quicker we can get this out there, and the quicker we can use this in the world for helping make these transitions. You've heard it from people who do this in healthcare, in finance, in law, from all over the world now, and in technology. And we truly believe and are passionate about helping bring this to the world in a way that it can be absorbed, adopted, and get us back to what our new reality is, what our new foundation of life is, and what it will be from here. So this went longer than we wanted, but we wanted to get this information out there. And I wanted to end with something that I believe is so profound right now. We're called to be architects of the future, not its victims. And when I was speaking a couple years ago to startups at the Startup Canada Export Challenge, I said, what does it take to overcome anything? It takes trust in yourself. It takes trust in your purpose. And if there's one thing you walk away with from this, you'll see that we're very purposeful about what we're doing. And when there's a challenge, we're looking for our outsider in perspectives. What are those challenges and how can we face it? And most importantly, please, please, please smile at fear. Fear is an important factor in human history that's allowed us to survive. We need to smile at it. We need to be afraid of doing the same thing. And we need to know that we can be powerful in the future. Join us to be part of the solution. Join us on our Telegram. Get a Telegram account. Join us there. That's where we're maintaining a community. Just search for Telegram BlockCerts. If you don't have it, download it. It's an app on your phone. It can be an app on your desktop. I'm tweeting more than I usually do. I only like to tweet when I've got something important to say. I try to keep it at that. Join us on LinkedIn, Tim Vasko, Dr. Zeid Mohamedali, Daniele, Mensi. Greg Kolar wasn't able to make it because he's in India at the moment and is stuck there. But Jason, we'll get all of this distributed out there so you can reach out to us, ask us questions. We encourage that. And mostly what I want every person to walk away with are some points. You are part of the solution. You are part of what will make us successful as a society. Be safe, stay strong, make a difference. And even if you don't believe in yourself, we believe in you. Sometimes it's the people no one imagines anything of who can do things that no one imagines. So thank you for taking the time. We hope there's some takeaways here that are important. We're a platform company. We're going to be a stronger platform company. We're going to deliver our platform to as many people on the planet for as little as possible. And we are going to build the new decentralized model. In 1997, I started writing, when I was a professor, I started writing a book, and it was called the Open Structure Organization. I believed in open structures then. I believe in them more today. Business models have changed forever. They will never be the same. There will never be a profitable, long-term centralized business model again. It will be distributed. It will take a rapid approach forward into this. There will be statistics that don't apply anymore, and all the new statistics will be based on de-identified data. It will be based on things we haven't faced before. And from a global perspective, we will see that our centralized system moves to decentralized. The business models will be monetized through trustonomics, and that's the new economics. And with that, thank you so much. Please stay safe. Please listen to what the healthcare professionals are saying. Please follow what's happening in the markets and look for insights. That's important. Be safe, stay strong, make a difference. Thank you.
Tim, I'd also like to thank everyone out there as well for being participating.
Yes, very much so. Thank you for the compliments on all the chats and everything. if you have questions and you don't want to take it up here, we've gone over, please do get in touch with us on our Telegram, get in touch with us on our LinkedIn, our emails. And Dan, I think that's it. Hopefully we've helped to make that difference for
Absolutely.
What we do.
Yeah, and thank you for our guests. Thank you, Jason, Daniel, Dr. Zeid, and Tim. Awesome job. And we'll wrap this up. You can send me questions as well, and that's dan@blockcerts.com. And also, we had a few questions that came in via text and other places, but what I will do is send that information out to everyone that registered and that was on the call today. We had a full house. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will do this again. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a safe day, and be safe with your friends and family.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.